everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, and we are doing a type of video that the algorithm demands. Apparently, all you people want to watch is, does Hearthstone player know if Yu-Gi-Oh card is good? But unfortunately, I would never speak to a Hearthstone player because I find them to be subhuman filth. So instead, we're going to do something a little bit different. Today, I will be asking a Yu-Gi-Oh player if they can tell a Yu-Gi-Oh card is good. And I have this up-and-coming YouTuber in chat right now. His name is Glasgow Yu-Gi-Oh. Am I saying that right?
I think I'm going to get like 4 hours of sleep on day 5 of my subathon, so I better get some respect on this name, okay? It's Glasgow Yu-Gi-Oh.
Farf is doing his subathon. I just called him up while he's cleaning a litter box, apparently, and we're just gonna run it. So, Farfa, let's begin with an easy one. Is Herald of the Abyss a good card?
So Herald of the Abyss is a good card because it's one of the few fundamental removals in Yu-Gi-Oh that affects the player rather than the monster itself. So it circumvents a lot of unaffected card effects that are popular in the meta right now, like for example Pearly. It deals with one of the very few cards in the game that can handle Manga Ra. Yes, the Divine Order of 3 in the manga says that it cannot be removed from the field. That includes Kaijus. And so because Herald affects the player, you are indeed forced to send it yourself, circumventing all of these protection effects. It is also searchable by thrust, which makes it fundamentally broken at basically 6 copies or 4, typically.
Unfortunately, Farfa, that is incorrect. Herald of the Abyss, though expected to be a pretty good card, unfortunately is just a little too narrow for widespread use. It does see a little bit of fringe playability as a thrust target, but frequently thrust is only played at maybe 1 copy because you never want to draw into multiples. It's got some utility against Pearly for sure, but so do a ton of other cards during this meta, especially things like Kaijus, if you're going first, Dimensional Barrier, and as a result, while it theoretically could warrant a sideboard slot in a world where Pearly's a top deck, we're just not living in that world right now. But that was pretty good reasoning. That was pretty close. Let's move on to the next one. Cat Shark. Is Cat Shark a good card?
So Cat Shark is a rank 2 monster that facilitates some really good OTKs in a very popular level 2 strategy known as Sprite. This is particularly good because one of the few ways that Sprite can actually outlarge monsters is with, or rather unaffected monsters, untargetable monsters, with something like Sprite Smashers. If they're unable to do that, they're going to have to really just beat over it quite hard, and facilitating the Gigantic by overlaying with a Link monster, typically the Sprite Sprint, or sometimes in Runic, you can go over with a Fusion monster. A non-extra deck monster would take it to 32, therefore further boosting it with Cat Shark to be really large, and so that would be one of the ways in which you can get over really, really big monsters and do some OTKs.
Again, Farfa, unfortunately that is incorrect.
Oh!
While Cat Shark was expected to be playable at the start of Sprite's tenure, it turns out it is a tool that increases the attack of, as you said, a monster that's already at 3,600 attack. For that reason, that threshold really didn't matter enough for individuals to ever have to worry about it. Sure, it can theoretically make a monster really, really big, but in a scenario in which your Gigantic survives with no interaction from your opponent, you're probably already winning the game. And in a scenario where your opponent might still have back row, they can just trade hugely for a Gigantic Sprite in which you've invested everything. What's more, you mentioned how Runic can help increase the attack of a large monster, but of course, Cat Shark's implications only extend to the battle phase, and Runic never gets that shit because it's a terrible archetype for babies. But again, this is very close. I mean, many duelists did think that Cat Shark was going to be good, but they were wrong. Next up, is Crossout Designator a good card?
So Crossout Designator is a strong quick play spell that allows you to deal with hand traps, especially in a meta where there's a lot of popular mid-range decks, archetypes that play very small engines and 1-2 card interactions. You're typically filling up the rest of your deck with cards that fend off your opponent from a defensive position. What's also particularly strong about Crossout Designator is that it deals really well with the mirror match. If you ever play in a mirror match, you can actually hit your opponent's fundamental cards that are important to their strategy. Typically, this was played at 3 copies last national season against Branded specifically because you could use it to stop Ash Blossom, but in the mirror match, turning off Branded Fusion itself acted as another layer of protection to just oppressively take down the mirror.
Unfortunately, Farfa, that is also incorrect. Crossout Designator is one of the most overhyped cards in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, pre-sailing for $130 before the price absolutely bottomed out. And the reason is that it saw a huge amount of play in the OCG because you could enter a duel confident your opponent would have upwards of 8 cards the exact same as you because of Max C. And because determining the winner of the Max C minigame was so critical to determining the winner of the match, the cards that improve your chance of doing that were really good. While you are correct that it does have huge implications in the mirror, and also for decks like Branded that are very bad and can't play through an Ash Blossom, we're in such a diverse format right now that there isn't likely going to be a card your opponent's playing that you are, and decks like Branded that lose to Ash have been completely excised from the metagame entirely, mostly because their players all got banned.
Must have been thinking of Nobleman of Crossout.
Yeah. Now that card's crazy. Next up, we've got Offerings to the Doomed.
Offering to the Doom, while may have been a potentially good card 20 years ago, has unfortunately been power crept over the years. There is a lot of good fundamental removal in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That can be just a little bit better. The targeting, the destruction is a little bit dated, and with things like potentially kaijus or more spot removal, depending on which archetype you're playing, skipping your draw phase is a bit of a heavy cost, and for the most part, you're probably not going to be seeing this that often. Although there have been instances where normal summon complete reliant decks have actually played Offering to the Doomed, but for the most part, you're really not going to see this except in maybe an old video game.
Farfa, unfortunately, you are 100% incorrect once again.
No!
Offerings to the Doom does something that no other card does. It does, without any additional help, destroy a card your opponent controls at spell speed 2 with the ability to be activated from your hand as a spell card. A ton of traps, of course, can do this, but this is the only one flexible enough to be activated on both your turn and your opponent's. Sure, losing a draw sucks, but unfortunately, it just doesn't matter that much given the pace of play of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! This card's seen a ton of play in everything from Sky Striker to decks that are actually good in recent years, though usually wielded by top players exclusively. All right, we're 0 for 4, but maybe you can catch up on the very last one. This is Change of Heart. Is Change of Heart a good card?
Change of Heart has been a card that's been banned for the longest time on the Forbidden Limited list and only recently came back to 1 copy and even 2 copies in Mastodon as a card that allows you to just completely force out any disruption your opponent might have and trade 1 for 1 with a negate. The most important aspect of it in recent months and weeks even is specifically decks that do not want to be removed from the field except by being linked off with Change of Heart. In the Unchained Mirror match, rather than destroying your opponent's field with something like board wipes, you can just simply take their monsters, use it as a link material, and therefore not trigger any of its destruction effects.
Unfortunately, Farfa, you are absolutely incorrect. Change of Heart is a terrible card. While you are correct that the best used case for this card is the Unchained Mirror match, you're absolutely wrong as to what card you should be using. Activating Change of Heart gives your opponent a very easy target for a set copy of Escape for the Unchained, which allows them to pop not only the card that you've just targeted, but your own Change of Heart, plussing without losing too much for the change. You won't be able to contest the rest of the stuff they have online, usually a Wave King Caesar. Instead, Marionette Might has seen a ton of play as the better copy of Change of Heart because, as we all know, Fiends and Zombies are the only good monster types anyway.
I think that the only person who would really know best about this would be Kevin Goncalves Rodriguez.
Maybe we'll get him next time. Oh, but that doesn't work because we're looking for current Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, right? Well, thank you so much for doing this sleep deprived at 2 a.m. while cleaning the litter box. I had a lot of fun. If people want to find your content, where can they see it?
Yeah, so it's twitch.tv NYHMNIM. That's NYHMNIM.
I appreciate you being on. Chat, the subathon is probably still going on by the time that this is getting uploaded. So please go give Farfa your money. Okay, so the funniest part of that one was having to pretend that Crossout isn't insane this format. Like, Farfa pretty much got them all right. I think he was wrong about Cat Shark. I think Cat Shark was always a bait. But he was just spot on for the rest of them. And he's like, yeah, so Crossout's really good. You know, you can expect your opponent is playing a lot of the same cards as you. It's really good for the mirror match. And I'm like, ah, fuck. Oh, shit.